Welcome to League of Lit, where we discuss books, adaptations, and anything else we wish to talk about, and tie it to lit, because we can.
Woot woot! Another day. No dollars. Sorry.
But we are going back into actually doing a book and an adaptation. The last couple ones have been either it was just
The book.
like a video thing
Yeah.
or just a book. We're going back to having a book and an adaptation today.
I know, it's very fancy of us.
Going back to our roots, if you will.
But before we start doing all of that, it is a truth universally acknowledged that we are not a spoiler-free podcast, so prepare for spoilers.
I mean, this is something that has been out for about 22 years.
Wow, I feel old.
I know. So, what we are talking about is the third book in the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. It was written by J.K. Rowling and was published July 8th, 1999.
Yes. Which I think with this book, I think J.K. sort of captured her audience more, because I think the first two books, and I think we talked about this in that episode, was the first two books almost feel more like children's books. Whereas by the time you get to the third, and even more again in the fourth, she starts to grow with her audience.
Yes, no, I'd say that Rowling really does well with growing with her audience, because it's growing as Harry grows.
Yeah.
Because Harry is 13 in this book.
Yeah.
So, there are different emotions and experiences that you have as a teenager versus when you're 11 or 12.
Yeah. And it starts to get a little darker in this book.
Mm-hmm.
As far as we start to see, I think, more of the sides of the dark side of magic.
Yes. And there's a level of, you can just think about your own growing up. Most parents work on hiding the evils of the world from children.
Yeah.
And so as you get older, you learn more about said evils, and because you have to learn how to prepare yourself to protect yourself. And so, it does really well of just growing with the characters, which in turn grows with the audience because of the audience that's intended for this series.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
So how do we want to go about this? Do we want to just like...
Do we want to talk... We talked about when the book comes out. Do we want to talk about when the movie came out and then sort of just discuss the differences rather than sort of going through all of it?
I feel like if we start trying to go through the book chapter by chapter, we'll end up with a full book discussion.
We're going to end up
it
with
will
a full
be too long.
And we can't do it. So maybe if we've talked a little bit about the book, we'll give when the movie came out, who directed it, and then we'll just sort of talk about things that are slightly different, things that we both liked from the book, things that we both liked from the movie.
Okay.
That way it's not chapter by chapter. Maybe by season 2 we'll finally figure out the perfect method for doing this. But
and the thing is, I think we'll figure it out with every single episode comes out. But as it has been a second since we've done a book and movie,
it's how do we do this
again? Feels a little foreign.
Yeah.
But at the same time, different books, I think, ask different things of us.
Yes.
And with this being such a well-known series,
I think it's nice that we can sort of just take this and kind of hash out what we had in the book versus what we had in the movie, and how each of those things changed the stories.
Yes.
So, yeah. So let's obviously anybody who's seen the Harry Potter series knows that each book has one movie minus the last book, which thank God they broke that into two.
Oh my gosh.
I wish they'd broken the fourth one into two. We'll get there when we get there.
Yes.
This movie, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, was released in the United States on June 4th of 2004. Obviously, it released a little differently, only a couple of days in the United Kingdom, but for America, since we are, in fact, Americans, it released June 4th of 2004.
Mm-hmm.
and it was directed by Alfonso Cuarón.
I'm not sure.
Cuarón?
We'll go with it.
I don't want to say it wrong, but I might have said it wrong.
Yeah. And fun fact about Alfonso here, he was handpicked, or really just like highly recommended, by Christopher Columbus, who had directed the previous 2 films.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Columbus was, I think, supposed to direct all of the Harry Potter movies, but I don't remember what the reason was, but there was a reason why he chose to back out. He still like helped produce them, but
yeah,
he thought it would be better for other people to direct the others.
This movie and this book introduced probably my favorite character in the series. And it's just because I feel like he needs a nap and a blanket. But it's Remus Lupin. A, I think he's very smart. Obviously very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And B, I just feel like he needs a nap and a blanket and just some time by himself.
I mean, if you think about his condition, it does take a lot out of him, so.
Yeah, because he's a werewolf, so. And this also is the first time we get introduced to the Marauders, which is obviously Harry's dad and all of his friends when they were in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still upset that we don't have a Marauders series or anything like that.
I want to say there's fan stuff that's out there.
There's lots of fan Marauder stuff. There's great fan fiction for it. There's a lot of like fan art for it. It's very...
Well, like I want to say that there's like, it's either like a short film or like a web series that's like related to it.
Yeah.
I've seen a few different things just kind of float around the internet.
There's a lot of people on TikTok.
That too.
Who do the Marauders.
That too. Starting with, like beginning of the book, we'll just kind of like work our way through the story, and we'll point out who's who, like which
new people.
Yeah, like because the only actor that changes from the first 2 films to this one is Dumbledore. This is the first one with Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. Yes, and the only reason why that recasting happened is because the previous Dumbledore passed away.
Yes, very sad. Very sad. Not that we don't like Michael Gambon, but...
Yes.
And when we get into the 4th book, I'll talk more about this.
And the thing is, because I think you mentioned it when the last time we spoke about Harry Potter, that partly because of the actor switch, you had a harder time trusting Dumbledore.
I did.
Let me tell you the reason why that is, because there's a very good reason. Michael Gambon never read a single Harry Potter book.
I can't trust Michael Gambon with anything.
He never had any idea of what the character was supposed to be like. He had no context of this is how the character was written in the novel. Like nothing. He never picked up a Harry Potter book.
It makes me so unhappy. I get it's not for everybody, but if you're going to be in it, at least skim it.
Yeah.
At least read the first one.
At least have an idea as to what you're, getting yourself into. Because not everybody can have the same success that Colin Firth had with Pride and Prejudice, where he didn't read it, but yet still portrayed Darcy just as well.
I think that's just Colin Firth. Not that he's as rude as Darcy, because obviously we've all seen Mamma Mia, but he's a little aloof.
Yeah. But so at the beginning, the first 2 chapters are kind of glossed over at the top of the movie. We really don't have anything from the first chapter like seen. Mm-hmm. Other than Harry doing Hogwarts homework like in the middle of the night because his aunt and uncle can't stand him, actually being a good student.
And anything to do with magic. We don't like that M word. Not here for it.
Exactly. And like we miss Ron calling Harry on the telephone.
Yes. Oh, what a great scene.
I feel like that would have been a fun scene to see. But like we only get to hear about it when Harry and Ron finally connect in Diagon Alley. But we don't really get to see like Harry receive any gifts or anything like for his birthday. Like,
Yeah.
It just kind of runs into it. Like the first thing we really see from the book on screen is Aunt Marge visiting.
Yes.
Which Aunt Marge is Vernon's sister, and she is played by Pam Ferris, who was Trunchbull in Matilda.
She's perfect. Ugh. She literally makes a perfect sister to Vernon.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you just saw them from behind and like they were dressed exactly the same, you'd be like, yeah, I don't know which one's which. Just because they give off the same vibes. So yes, Aunt Marge comes to visit and insults Harry and his parents and everything that he is, essentially. And thus Harry accidentally uses magic and inflates her like a balloon.
Well, and the thing I think is important to like point out is Harry never utters any spells.
Nope.
It just happens.
Which is so interesting because that is such a skill. They don't talk about it, I don't think, enough in the books or the movies, but it's such a skill to be able to do wordless magic.
Yes.
Most of their magic is done with spells. And you actually have to recite the words. And a lot of times you also actually have to have your wand. So the fact that Harry can just
do it without wand or words is...
It's something that's really never talked about.
It's never fully addressed.
No, that Harry... Like, they sort of hit on it with Hermione much later.
Yeah, no, I'm not...
But even then...
I'm blanking on when it is, but, like, I know it's talked about at some point.
Even then, it's, like, minuscule. And I'm like... It's so interesting that we didn't feel that we needed to talk more about this. But he inflates her.
I mean, like, even if you think about it, in the first book, when Hagrid, puts a tail on Dudley, he does that without words. Like,
which really said something.
Yes.
So he inflates her and then essentially runs away from home because he's worried that he's going to be expelled from school because he knows that he's not supposed to be using magic outside of school. And again, hits more on this in the book than it does in the movie, but Harry encounters a large black dog that seems to be watching him. In the movie, it's only sort of hinted at that he's being watched.
Yeah, I mean, there is a brief encounter with a black dog, but it's not really, I think just that's part of, like the fun with a book is you can drag certain things out for as long as you want. So they do drag it out a little bit more because if you think about it, if it was actually being told, because not that Harry Potter is written in a first person narrative, it's written in a third person narrative. But like if this was actually told from Harry's first person perspective, he'd be dragging it out and being dramatic as he can because he's a 13-year-old boy. Like,
and he's Harry Potter and he's dramatic.
Yes.
But while he is sitting on the street, running away, he gets picked up by the night bus. That's Night with a K. Which the night bus sequence in the movie is so fun.
It is.
And I'm not shocked that they made that, from what I understand. I haven't been there. But they made that a part of the Universal Studios world. You can go on the night bus? Am I wrong? I feel like I've seen videos of people going on the night bus.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I don't think that it goes anywhere, but I believe that you can meet the shrunken head whose name has escaped me.
I don't know the name.
Yeah, see?
It did not stick out to me.
No.
You have Stan, who is the younger dude who first greets Harry. And then you have Ernie, who actually drives the bus, but I have no idea who the shrunken head is. Did not stick out in my brain.
But essentially the night bus, from what we understand, just knows where wizards are and knows when they need to be picked up.
Well, in the movie, they say that he flagged him down.
Yes.
And I don't know if it was because he lit the tip of his wand.
Yeah.
Because he was trying to see
the dog.
The dog
what was in the bushes.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we know is the dog, but
it's less,
it's less easier to see because of it being a black dog.
In a bush.
Yes. In the middle of the night.
Yeah. And the night bus is gonna take him to the leaky cauldron.
Yes. And something that like I think is interesting from the book perspective with the whole like night bus thing is Harry calls himself Neville Longbottom. But that's not something that like ever is even addressed in the movie. And part of it is it's not really all that important per se.
It's mostly just like a nod to the fact that Neville could have been the chosen one.
Yes.
That there is that chance that Neville would have been the one that defeated Voldemort in that moment.
Yes.
Just JK trying to be like, look at this. Remember that? Little nod. Little sprinkling.
It's on the night bus. That's like our first introduction to Sirius Black. Like through the papers, which Sirius Black is played by Gary Oldman.
Brilliant. Perfection. What a brilliant job he does playing the madman.
No, I mean, he was just solid.
But the night bus takes him to the leaky cauldron where Cornelius Fudge, who is the Minister of Magic, asks Harry to stay in Diagon Alley for his protection.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's there, obviously, we get Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger back.
Yep, and that entire like whole leaky cauldron sequence in the movie is very squished together, and a lot of it is there's not like a whole lot of exciting things that happen from the book, so like it's fine. But it would have been cool just to see a little bit of Harry getting to wander through Diagon Alley on his own, like getting his own stuff, instead of it being, oh, by the way, I've already done all of your school shopping for you. Here's your stuff. You're not allowed to leave. Like it makes him look more like a prisoner, than what was presented in the book.
And I do feel like a lot of times the movies sort of portray it more that way. They give more of the idea that Harry is a prisoner when things go wrong and he's involved, whereas in the books it feels a little less strict and a little they're just not quite as like, you stay in your room and don't come out.
Right, which I think in the book that provides a contrast for Harry's life with the Dursleys versus Harry's life in the wizarding world. I think either way, Harry still feels better about his life in the wizarding world.
Yeah, no matter what.
Because he really knows that those in the wizarding world actually like understand him and are actually trying to do what's best for him, where he doesn't believe for a second that the Dursleys are actually trying to help him.
Yeah. So before they go back to Hogwarts, Harry is told that Sirius Black is a convicted murderer, and he's obviously a convicted murderer from the wizarding world, and has escaped from the wizard prison Azkaban to kill Harry. His whole goal is to come and kill Harry.
His supposed goal, anyways.
Supposed goal. We don't
because, well, it's like the thing is everything is very unclear. Like obviously because of the way that the wizard newspapers are, the pictures move, so you kind of get to see that he looks like a madman, and he seems to be acting like a madman with the way that he moves. However, no one really knows, because no one was actually there.
Yeah. What
actually happened when Sirius was taken to go to Azkaban.
Yeah. My assumption is always that they tortured him. And that's why he's sort of manic like that in the picture.
Well, and with what you hear of Azkaban with the Dementors and whatnot, like, it's very understandable how he got to become so madman-like.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that his sole purpose is to make life miserable for Harry.
I know. They go from like point A to point B so fast, and I'm like, y'all, this man was just convicted of killing his friend. What does that have to do with Harry? He's just, if at that point y'all are just linking him to Voldemort, he's just evil. Like, Voldemort's whole goal is to kill Harry, but not everybody who's with him. Entire goal is to just kill Harry Potter.
This is true. This is true.
So we board the Hogwarts Express to go back to school. Very exciting. And while we're on our way to Hogwarts, the train stops. Very unusual. It's a magical train. It's not supposed to do that. and it's boarded by Dementors, who are the ghostly prison guards. And they're at that point just searching for Black, trying to make sure that he doesn't get to Hogwarts.
Right. And so the fun fact about the Dementors, it's based on J.K. Rowling's battle with depression.
They're very scary.
Yes.
They're terrifying.
But that is where the idea of them came from.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very clear and understandable picture of what depression is like.
Creepy, gauzy, black mass.
Yes. And it's in that interaction with the Dementors that we really, like, honestly get to meet Lupin for the first time. Like,
yes,
Lupin is in the same train compartment with Harry, Ron, and Hermione.
He's napping. He's tired.
Right. He's asleep when they walk in. But, like, they don't think anything of it. There wasn't really anywhere else for them to sit, and Harry wanted to talk about Sirius Black with Ron and Hermione because he needed to talk about it with somebody.
Yeah.
And so Lupin is played by David Thewlis. I'm guessing on pronouncing his last name.
Yeah, I'm not going to be any better.
But before being casted as Lupin, he was originally considered for the role of Quirrell.
Drone in the dungeon.
It's like, can you imagine him as Quirrell?
I mean, I can. I do love him as Lupin, though, so I'm happy that he got to be cast as Lupin.
And then we're gonna, since technically at this point we've been introduced to most of the Marauders by this point from a like casting perspective, because I've seen a lot of people on the internet complain about how the Marauders were casted, like just in the way that they look, because they don't necessarily look like they are the quote proper age to be like friends with Harry's parents.
My biggest problem would only be wow, hello, goodbye. Peter. Sorry, my brain literally forgot Peter. I was like, it's Sirius, it's Remus, it's Harry's. What was the other one? My biggest problem would be Peter. So
out of the 4 Marauders, and then you add Snape into the mix, from the actors that were casted to play those parts, Snape is the oldest.
Yeah.
Like Alan Rickman was the oldest, as he was born, I want to say, in the 40s. It was like late 40s, early 50s. And then you have Gary Oldman, and then the actor who plays Peter Pettigrew, whose name is Timothy Spall.
Okay, so Alan Rickman was born in 1946. Gary Oldman was born in 1958. What's the name of the guy who plays Peter?
Timothy Spall.
Timothy Spall. 1957. Who else am I looking up?
David Thewlis. David Thewlis was like 63. Like I remember, like
63.
The reason why that one stuck in my head is because
Harry's dad.
I don't have that written down.
Harry Potter.
But the reason why like David's birth year stuck in my head was because that's around the time that like my parents were born.
Yeah.
And so like thinking about it from the perspective of like, okay, if this is literally like they're supposed to be these ages, David's honestly like the most perfect casting from an age perspective, because that would have been like, and obviously people have babies at different times, so it's not like a hard and fast, but like you're not going to really find somebody who was born in the 40s having children like born in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah. Adrian Rollins played James Potter, and he was born in 1958. So really they did a much better job with the actual Marauders.
Mm-hmm.
Still a little, because David Thewlis is younger than the rest of them by several years. Mm-hmm. But Alan Rickman, I mean, I will say Alan Rickman looked good for being as old as he was.
Right.
That helps, I think. But yeah.
But like, you know, a little with the way that they casted it though, with Gary Oldman and Timothy Spall, like because of the specific experiences that their characters have, the way that they look really works.
Yeah,
And
no.
it's not that they look like bad or anything. It's they look aged.
They look aged because they're all tired. Lupin's a werewolf, and the three of them genuinely together had to deal with Harry and Lily, not Harry,
James.
with James and Lily being murdered. Peter even more so because he was involved. Obviously, we haven't necessarily gotten there, but we are not spoiler free. Sirius because now he's been in prison, a terrible prison, a magical prison, for 13 years. However old Harry is.
They all have different life experiences that would have them be aged the way that they look on screen. But
Snape's
yet
just
there
been
are
living
people
his life
on the
at Hogwarts.
But yet there are people who complain about how old they look. You know what?
I think they fit the roles really well because David is skinny and lanky and he looks tired, and it's because he transforms on a regular basis into a werewolf.
Yeah, once a month.
And Gary was so thin in this movie. So thin, especially compared to later times when we see him.
Yeah.
And I forgot the name of the guy who plays
Timothy Spall.
And Timothy looked, again, we're not spoiler free. He's a rat.
Yes.
He's been living as Ron's rat Scabbers. So, like, I'm not shocked that that's how he looks. Because he comes out of being a rat and it's just like,
yeah,
oh, I'm not a rat anymore. I can walk on my legs. Like, I'd be tired too. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think people just need something to complain about, to be honest.
Probably, but, things to point out.
But yes, they meet Remus on the train. He uses a Patronus charm to take the Dementor away. Not that it helps Harry, who still passes out like a little girl.
And he gets a lot of flack for it, which...
He really does. Like, Dementors are scary. You'd pass out too, and they also, like, latch on to trauma.
Yeah. Well, and this is another spot where the book differs from the movie. After the Dementor, like, interaction, this is the first time you see, like, it's on the train. It's the first time you see Malfoy, where in the movie we don't get to see Malfoy until it's time for the opening feast, and he is like, Potter, is it true you actually fainted?
Which, I mean, brilliant acting on
yes
Tom's part.
Yes, Tom Felton is wonderful.
He's so brilliant.
And then this is just more of a note on the frog choir that we get to see before the opening feast. This is the last Harry Potter film that John Williams composed of the franchise.
Sad, because he's so brilliant.
But the reason why he still gets, like, credit is because of them always using Hedwig's theme, which was a piece that John Williams composed.
I'm not allowed to sing it because we don't own it. But you know what it sounds like.
Yes. But, like, this was the last, like, full film of the franchise that he composed, which, I mean, I think because of how much Hedwig's theme is used throughout the series, you kind of forget about that. But it's definitely, like, because you can hear it, like, in the frog choir and whatnot, like, just the whole thing. Which the only reason why the frog choir exists is because in this book, Flitwick doesn't have a whole lot of, like, he doesn't really have much of anything to do.
No.
But they still wanted to utilize Warwick Davis.
Because he's so great.
He is. So they created this plot point that Flitwick would be in charge of the frog choir. And so poof, we have Flitwick.
So we do find out at the first feast that the Dementors are going to be patrolling and guarding the school until Black is captured. Because they would believe that Sirius Black is going to come after Harry. So where would he go but Hogwarts? Mm-hmm. Which they're not wrong.
One of the things that you don't actually see at the feast that we get in the book, or it's not at the feast, maybe it is. My notes are unclear. It's because you have the fact that, like, the sorting ceremony was missed in chapter 5, but then chapter 6, like, I have where Slytherins are taunting Harry, but Fred and George comfort Harry in, like, the whole Dementor thing.
Yeah.
Which is something you don't see a whole lot of in the movies. It's definitely not like, oh, this definitely doesn't exist. It's just not something that you see a whole bunch from them. And I'm sure that was just like a choice that the writers and director made.
Yeah.
But then we get to go to divination.
Oh, very fun class, very fun teacher.
This is the first time we get to meet Sybil Trelawney, the divination professor. And Sybil Trelawney is played by Emma Thompson.
One of our favorite people. We should just call this podcast the Emma Thompson Appreciation Podcast. We do so many of her movies.
She does a lot of literary things. We can't change that.
She loves literature.
We also can't help that at one point she was married to Kenneth Branagh, who also does a lot of literature. So we talk about them both a lot.
I love her as Trelawney. She's so you barely recognize her under the big glasses and the hair and the scarf and the sort of like croniness that she adds to it. She adds sort of that like old hag kind of witchiness to it. More so in this movie, I think, than when we see her again later.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But I wonder how much of it is an act, because a lot of her job kind of feels like it's an act. Which, I mean, divination is obviously, according to Hermione, not for everybody.
This is where we get to see how Harry is being prophesied to die, which, I mean, we kind of already know that. Maybe if it's a younger reader, they may not have picked up on that. But as adult readers, you can pick up pretty quickly that, yes, Harry is going to have to die at some point. Like, that's just the way being the chosen one works.
Eventually, all of this culminates in Harry somehow either dying or being like really badly injured, because that's the only way that he's going to be able to sort of flip the situation.
Yes.
Which obviously, for anybody who's finished the books,
yes,
he does kind of die.
So, there's the talk of the Grim, and, Harry's a little concerned that the Grim was the dog that he saw when he got on the night bus. Like, he's a little nervous.
He's a little paranoid.
A little bit. Everything
spooks Harry in this movie, which in the way it's shot, I'm not shocked. I'd be spooked too. It's very dark.
Yeah. And then we go to Care of Magical Creatures.
With our new Care of Magical Creatures teacher, Ruby's Hagrid. I love Hagrid so much.
And Hagrid's like really excited about getting to have this opportunity.
Because he loves creatures.
Well, besides the fact that he loves creatures, considering he was expelled from Hogwarts, like there's only so much that he would have actually been able to do with his life. So to have this opportunity is really, really a big thing for Hagrid.
Which is good, because his first class goes kind of bad.
Well,
it's Draco's fault.
The thing is,
it's okay.
It's like, it's not Hagrid's fault, because if everybody just listens to the instructions, then nothing bad happens. But because Draco wants to spite Harry, because you can't convince me that that's not what it is.
And be rude to Hagrid, because he doesn't believe that Hagrid deserves his position.
Yes. So, like, because of the motives of self-centered, self-important Draco Malfoy, he ruins things with Buckbeak the Hippogriff and gets scratched, and he makes it sound like he lost his arm.
It's very exaggerated. It's very dramatic. Oh no. And of course, that's going to go over super well since Lucius Malfoy is his father.
Yes. They add a scene in the movie that I don't think is found
in the book, which is the one with the fat lady. Are we talking about the same scene?
No. That is in the book. When they're in study hall, and it's been noted that Black has been spotted.
Oh yes, no, you're right.
Because this is before they have their first defensive against the dark arts with Lupin.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think it's out of place.
Doesn't necessarily strike me as important.
Yeah, it doesn't really do much other than just remind you, oh, hey, Sirius Black is still a thing.
Yeah.
So then we get to go to Defense Against the Dark Arts with Professor Lupin,
Very fun, very fun.
where we get to learn about boggarts.
Oh my gosh, this scene is so good.
It's so much fun.
It's just ridiculous because, I mean, essentially a boggart is like a nightmare demon. That's what it feels like. It just latches on to things that are your worst fear, and that's what it manifests itself as.
Yeah.
Which is why when Neville walks up to it, will always be one of the best moments. Snape
Yes.
coming out, and then Lupin's way of fixing it is to sort of imagine it in kind of a exaggerated and silly situation. And so then we get Alan Rickman dressed in women's clothes with that big hat on his head.
Yes.
It's a great moment.
Yeah, and I mean that entire like interaction, it's a good empowering moment for Neville. So like it's really good for his character development.
Yeah.
And I think I would have been very disappointed if they didn't include that aspect of it.
Yeah.
That, like, no, Neville has to be first. Because having, like Ron and Pavarti and then it going on to like Harry, like, because those are you don't get to see a whole lot of people try it with a boggart, but like, some of that is okay, we have a certain amount of time, so you have to be very intentional with who you choose.
Yes. Because obviously Harry was always going to have to be last because the boggart turns into a Dementor.
Yes.
Because everybody, and I remember reading this section of the book and knowing that Lupin's thought is that it's going to be Voldemort. And when it's not, I think we were all a little shocked. But it's like, what's the most recent? Harry doesn't remember Voldemort.
Right.
He's got who's going to step out? We didn't even know at that point what Voldemort looked like.
Yeah.
So why would Harry, who's a baby, know?
I mean, I think your subconscious has ways of projecting things. If you think about the way your dreams work, like you could literally have somebody who you just like happen to pass while you were out shopping, like show up in your dream. Mm-hmm. Because your subconscious just like, oh, that's a face. I'm going to like remember that face. I think I'm wondering if that's kind of how boggarts work a little bit. I mean, it's definitely probably a little bit how fear works. Because if you think about unexplained fears.
But his most recent fear is going to be the Dementors.
Yes. No, this is very true. But like in the book, Harry wasn't allowed to face a boggart at all. Like Lupin didn't even give him a chance to let it change.
Because he thought it was going to be Voldemort.
Right. Where in the movie, you get to see it change into a Dementor, and then Lupin stands in front of him. And it looks more like Lupin is trying to prevent Harry from fainting again.
Yeah, Lupin's just like tired of this kid fainting.
Yeah, so like it doesn't necessarily have the same kind of thing of like, oh, you're not allowed to like be in front of this because of the potential person that could have actually walked out.
Yeah.
We next have when Harry's trying to get McGonagall to sign his form.
Yes, to sign his form to go to Hogsmeade. Okay.
To Hogsmeade, yes. And so, but like she won't let him do it.
It has to be a parent.
Yeah, it has to be a parent
or guardian.
Which at this point in time, Harry knows that his only guardians are the Dursleys, and they just won't do anything that, would make Harry happy.
Yeah, and a part of my brain goes, well, just forge it. They'd have magics for that.
Yes.
Forged a lot of things from my mom back in the day. I eventually got to the point where if I forgot to get her to sign something, I'd be like, I have to forge your signature. And she wouldn't carry. She'd be like, what's it for?
Yep.
I got very good at it.
Because of that, in the book, Harry wanders around Hogwarts.
Yeah.
And runs into Lupin messing with Grindylows.
Yeah.
But they don't have it that way in the movie. And I don't know that it really makes a difference what Lupin is doing and how they end up coming across one another. It's just good that they like have that moment of getting to talk about the Dementors and the fact that Lupin knew Harry's parents. However, I'd really like to understand why the movies are so obsessed with this little fact that Harry has his mother's eyes. Like, his face looks like his father, but the eyes are his mom's. I don't understand why that's so important, and because it gets mentioned every
So many
single movie.
I don't know. Because I know they also had a really hard time with Dan because he couldn't wear contacts.
Yes.
So anybody they casted as his mom had to have his eyes.
Yep.
Rather than, because his eyes aren't the correct color.
Correct.
Because he couldn't wear contacts. I'm like, are y'all trying to fix it by just being like, you've got her eyes, those are them. Look at those two colors, that's what they are.
And that could very well be it. It honestly comes across a little creepy.
Yeah, because everybody's like, you have your mother's eyes. And we're like, yeah, we get it.
Like, that's honestly a side comment that happens early on in the book series. It's not really something that they like harp on.
It's also like not that important. Like, a lot of people have their parents' eyes because that's kind of how parentage works. It doesn't always work that way. I have completely different colored eyes, but like...
It depends on what genes are strongest and what your parents' genes carry.
I'm like, are y'all trying to tell us something about Lily? Like, was she giving everybody eyes? Like, what's the thought process? No, I agree with you. I agree.
Like, I don't understand.
It comes off really creepy that everybody feels the need to mention it.
Yes. I want to say it's always a male, too.
Yeah, because Ramus does it. Doesn't Sirius do it?
Yep, Sirius does it. Snape does it at one point in the series.
Yeah, because
I think Dumbledore does it at one point.
Well, the biggest thing, too, is... You get the impression that Lily didn't have female friends. She was friends mostly, honestly, genuinely with Snape for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that necessarily she didn't have female friends. Oh, my God. It's just that maybe we never met any of them. They were never important enough to mention. Because she's friends with Snape, has sort of that falling out with Snape, starts dating James, and then is sort of in James's friend group. And none of the other Marauders are married at this point.
But, like, none of the other professors who were professors when his parents were there.
Yeah, McGonagall's not over there like, oh, Harry.
Right.
Like, right. No, she don't care.
And it could just be because McGonagall has enough sense to not say anything about it.
McGonagall's like, the boy doesn't want to hear about this. God, I'm tired of it.
Anyways, we're going to move forward. Now we get to the fat lady.
So the fat lady's portrait, which obviously everybody knows guards the Gryffindor housing area, is found destroyed and empty. And they find the fat lady hiding in another painting. And she tells Dumbledore and everybody standing there that Black has returned to the castle. Which, the way this is done in the movie, I love the way she delivers this line. It's just so, the, like, drama of, Sirius Black! In the castle! I'm like, it's just very... I live for the drama that English people tend to bring to movies. I don't... Especially if they're, like, sort of period pieces, because she would be considered a period piece.
Yes.
Because she's set in the time period that her painting is set in. It's just very fun. Next, so at that point, we find out that Sirius Black has been inside the castle, which is... Sirius Black has been inside the castle. Take that how you will. So they say.
Again, we don't know a whole lot. I mean, you do see, like, slash marks in the fat lady's painting, but with the way that they are, that looks more just like cutting down with a sword, not like...
a dog.
Yeah, not like claw marks or anything. It just...
Which, at that point, do we know that Sirius Black is also the dog?
No, we don't.
Yeah, but as an audience, we are not aware that he is an animagus.
Right.
So, like, the fact that it would be claw marks, like, why?
But even then, like, the slash marks that we do see...
Yes.
Doesn't even...
Like a sword.
But with the pattern that it is, it doesn't make sense. Why would somebody, like, slash the painting that way? one slash mark would have been fine and made sense for
Why
one
do we have
person,
to be like,
but it was like multiple. So it's like, okay, are we trying to imply that Sirius Black is the dog?
The Grim?
Right.
And trying to give Harry the idea that it is the Grim?
Right.
Maybe that's, I mean, yeah, maybe.
But it's not strong enough to be
I agree with you.
This is what this is.
This is the thing that we're doing. No, you're right. You're completely right.
Yeah. But the next thing we see in the movie is the next Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson with Snape. And we have page 394.
Turn to page 394. I love that.
But the thing that happens in the book before all of that is when the fat lady is gone, we have all of the houses in the Great Hall, and then there's that selection of Sir Cadogan being the new portrait.
Yes.
And Madame Hooch is assigned to overseeing Gryffindor practice because Harry is the one who's at greatest risk with Black on the Loose on campus.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is another thing that is literally completely overlooked in the movie. But this is the first time we get any mention of Cedric Diggory. Yes. Because of what is coming up with Quidditch. Instead of Gryffindor going to be facing Slytherin like they had been practicing for the entire time, they're going to be facing Hufflepuff. And then we get to hear about Cedric Diggory, who is the new captain for Hufflepuff. He's also a seeker. And so we get a little bit of an introduction to Cedric Diggory, which isn't really all that important in this book. So, it makes sense that it's not really something that they worry about.
I just love that she already was like, just FYI, this is a name, remember it.
Yeah. But it's important really more so for the next book, because that's really when we get to know Cedric Diggory. But
it's the only time we get to know Cedric Diggory.
This is true. But this is the first introduction we get. And there's another character that we get introduced to that doesn't become important until later, that we just get an intro to in this book, but is not seen in this movie. And we'll get there.
We'll get there.
When we get there.
I love that.
But yeah, then we have the Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson where Snape decides to teach on werewolves. Because
this is a little hint, nudge, nudge.
Snape is petty.
Well, he's only teaching the class because Lupin is sick.
Right.
And his thought process is, well, I'll show y'all all what he's sick with.
But that's a very petty thing.
Oh, it's very petty.
Snape
has been petty. Snape is the king of petty. Snape died on that petty hill, okay?
Yes. Because that's the thing with Snape is he's petty when it comes to Harry Potter. He's petty when it comes to really anything that is connected to the Marauders or Harry Potter. It's like, dude, a lot of people think it's super romantic that, he loved Lily for all that time.
No.
It's not.
It's creepy. It's weird that 13 years after her death, that he is still this weird and that he treats her child like this just because Harry is James's kid.
Yes.
Okay, well, Harry can't help who his parents were.
Exactly.
Harry wasn't there. Harry wasn't the one who was like, Lily, don't date Severus, who's crazy. Date James. And obviously later in the storyline, we get more information about why he's sort of more mad about it, because we do learn a lot about James sort of picking on him, but then the retaliations that he used were why Lily was never going to be with him.
Exactly.
He's a stalker. It's okay. We can say it. No, a lot of people love the always thing, and I'm like, y'all are weird. No offense to anybody, but it's a little stalker behavior.
Yeah, so we get a little bit of in the movie, we get a little bit of an animagus versus werewolf. What's the difference? Mm-hmm. So that's introducing us to the idea of those two things, because we'll get to actually see them in action later. And then we have Quidditch in a storm. And I had it in there, no Cedric, question mark.
I guess they didn't want to have to cast him.
Well, and I think it's possible that, like, they could have casted him and it would have just been like an uncredited appearance.
Yeah. It's possible, too, that JK didn't say this is going to be an important character in the next movie.
Also possible.
She probably didn't think it was important for him to be mentioned actively in this movie and to be cast at all. Because she was like, he'll be important in the fourth book, and it's the only one he's going to be in, really, so...
Yeah.
We'll use him then.
Right. And then we have the Dementors that exist, and it's a very dramatic fall that we have from Harry.
They sort of swarm on Harry, which I think, obviously, now we all kind of know why. Because he's a piece. He's a piece. He's a piece. Right? That's got to be why.
Because of what?
Because he's scared. Because he's a piece of... He is a Horcrux.
Oh, yes. I was like, a piece of what?
A piece of what? A piece of the puzzle. But he's a piece, and he's also just terrified.
Well, yeah, and that's something that, like, the book touches on with Harry fearing fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really what, like, the Mentors represent is fear embodied. And so,
and it's also what draws them in is that fear.
Yes.
Because that's how they find you.
Yes.
They're like, you're scared of us. We'll come swirl at you. It's depression, kids.
Yeah. And then next we get to see Lupin and Harry talk about, like, why the Dementors like affect him so.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then we also, like, briefly learned that not only did they lose the match, but Harry's broom, after he fell off of it, went into the Whomping Willow and has been smashed.
Destroyed. So sad.
Yes. Next, we have, I think the way that they handle Fred and George giving Harry the Marauders map, like, it's different than how they do it in the book.
Yes.
But the fact that, like, I think it would have been one of those hills that plenty of fans would have died on had it not been Fred and George to give it to him.
Absolutely. It had to be them because they're the ones that would obviously find that map.
Exactly.
If anybody's going to find a map that literally says, I solemnly swear I am up to no good.
Yes.
It would be those two.
Yes. But the way that they have it in the movie is where Fred and George, like, pick Harry out while he's under the invisibility cloak.
Yeah.
Because Harry decides, I'm not going to stay in the castle for this next Hogsmeade weekend. I'm going. And I'm going to do it in the invisibility cloak and no one's going to find me. Like, it just shows that Harry's ready for the map, I think.
Yeah. And of course, the Marauders map, probably one of the most recognizable things from Harry Potter at this point.
It was one of, I think, one of the most intricate props.
Yeah.
That was designed for the franchise, because they have it to where each layer of the map is a different level of the castle.
Yeah.
Like, they went massively detailed with it. Oh, yeah. No, I think
cool.
The way that they brought it to life was so cool, because there's not a whole lot of description in the book of what it looks like. So they had a lot of freedom with it.
Yeah.
And I think they did really well. Then we get to see kind of Harry going to Hogsmeade.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say...
Isn't this where he overhears that conversation that's like Fudge and McGonagall?
Yes. Yeah, it's McGonagall, Hagrid, Flitwick, and Fudge.
There it is.
It's like, that's not how it is in the movie.
No.
In the movie, it's Rosmerta, McGonagall, Hagrid, and Fudge.
Yes, and they're talking about
Black and the Potters.
Black and the Potters and how they were once friends.
Yes. I want to say that the Shrieking Shack, I know it was introduced differently in the fact that, like,
they talk about it when they see it.
Right. But, like, it's Hermione and Ron at the Shrieking Shack, but in the book it was only Ron and Harry.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not really sure where Hermione was. I'm trying to find where, like, I thought I had made note of it, but I know I remember, like, when I was rewatching the movie, it's like, oh no, they squished that together.
Yeah.
Because it's also at the same time that Malfoy gets messed with by Harry and the invisibility cloak. And so, like, they just kind of squished all of that together instead of having, like, multiple visits. And then we get to see Lupin and Harry expecto patronum.
Expecto patronum. Learning how to defend himself against the Dementors with the Patronus charm, which is where we get Patronus.
The only spell Harry actively uses in the whole series.
Literally. What's the other one he does all the time? It's the disarming one. My brain has just literally stopped working.
Stupefy.
Thank you. Stupefy. He does that one.
I had to think about it. I was like, Accio is another.
Yeah, but he really uses really Stupefy and Expecto Patronum a lot.
It's the only spells that he really knows how to use.
At least with his mouth. He knows how to do things without. He's actually okay at magic if it doesn't speak. So there is this whole sort of backstory that's kind of happening, sort of interlocking, but sort of comes to a head where Ron and Hermione's friendship suffers.
Yes.
And Ron believes that Crookshanks, who is Hermione's cat, has eaten his rat scabbers.
Yes. And we don't really get a whole lot of, like, and it's not like it's super important. It is kind of important because of, like, where we sit.
Yeah.
With Scabbers being Pettigrew. Like, it is kind of important to watch that particular plot line develop. But it's when they're all in Diagon Alley and Hermione decides that she wanted to get an owl, that they're, like, in the pet store, and, like, Scabbers had been feeling poorly, so, like, they had to be there anyways to see if there's anything that, like, they could do to help Scabbers. And Crookshanks just kind of shows up, and Hermione decides, forget the owl, I want that cat.
I love Crookshanks. That's very me. I'd be like, owls are cool. There's a cat over there. I want that. I want the most obnoxious creature you can possibly give me. A cat who can't deliver messages, can't take anything anywhere, and is going to try to eat my future husband's rat.
I mean, but something that they jump around with from the book, Harry receives a new broom.
Mm-hmm. A firebolt.
Right. And I think it's because we don't really see any other Quidditch stuff. Because you also don't see Oliver Wood in this. Like, you hear about him a bunch in the book, but you don't see him on screen at all. Like, literally after the match with Hufflepuff, there isn't anything else.
Nope, we're busy.
We're too busy trying to save Buckbeak and pretending that we are up to no good. Like, but there's, like, a whole sequence with the firebolt that, like, Hermione ends up telling McGonagall, so they confiscate Harry's broom because they have to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with, because you don't know who it came from because there's no note. But the way that they handle that in the movie is he gets it at the end, after we already know everything, so there's no question of, oh, is this been jinxed? Oh no,
nobody cares.
We have to check.
Point. Like, it's just a nice gift.
Yeah.
Because in the book he gets it during Christmas.
Yes, yeah, it's a gift that he receives at Christmas, and it's after Buckbeak has been sentenced to death.
Yes. Because of Draco provoking him.
Yeah, and so because the other thing with not having anything else with Quidditch in there, you also miss the opportunity for there to be Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw. Therefore, you also don't get to see Cho Chang, because we're introduced to Cho Chang in this book, but not in this movie.
Harry's first girlfriend.
And it's like there's a little hint that Harry is interested in Cho, but it's not like very clear.
Yeah.
But we know that Cho's a 4th year and a Ravenclaw seeker, so seeker power couple, right?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, and we also, by not getting to have that match, we miss out on seeing Draco Malfoy and his cronies as Dementors and getting a little bit more than they bargained for.
Yeah, because they don't do that. They sort of do him and his cronies pretending to be Dementors during the Care of Magical Creatures class, where they like put their things over their head and they're just like, woo!
Right, which doesn't have
it's not the same. It's not the same
effect
no.
as seeing Dementors on the Quidditch pitch.
Yeah, it's not the same effect.
Then we have Scabbers is missing in the movie, which lines up with the fact that apparently Sirius Black was in their dormitory.
Yes. The trio witnesses Buckbeak's execution. I put quotations on that for a reason. And in all of that, Scabbers shows up. Well, at that point, he's found Scabbers, and he's just holding on to him, and Scabbers, in the movie at least, Scabbers bites him and runs away.
Yes. Yeah, no, Scabbers was found at Hagrid's hut in the movie.
Which, when Ron chases Scabbers, that's when we get the large black dog appearing, and the dog drags Ron and Scabbers into a hole at the base of the Whomping Willow.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very fun scene of Harry and Hermione trying to get into the Whomping Willow.
Yes.
Because she's a mad tree. And we find out that that hole leads into an underground passage that goes to the Shrieking Shack.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there that we discover that the dog is Sirius Black in animal form as an animagus. Which this scene between David and Gary of David holding the wand on him and then hugging him, just I'm always like, this is good. This is a good moment. This is best friends. I love this. And because Harry's like, what is happening?
Yeah, but before we get to Buckbeak's execution, Harry points out to Remus Lupin that Pettigrew shows up on the Marauders map.
Marauders map. Mm-hmm.
Where that's not something that Harry does in the book.
No.
That was just something when there was a time when Harry was wandering around the castle. He runs into Snape, and then Lupin comes and saves him. Or no, the way that it works in the book is Harry runs into Snape, the map insults Snape. Snape calls Lupin in for consultation because it's technically dark magic, and that's supposed to be Lupin's area of expertise. And that's when Lupin gets hold of the map. But just the way, it's...
They definitely are more obvious about it in the movie. They want you to know that this is an important feature, that you can see Peter Pettigrew, who is supposed to be dead, on the Marauders map.
Yes.
Which is what leads Lupin, essentially, to following them and finding them in the Shrieking Shack, because...
Yes.
He knows that also Sirius knows that obviously that rat is Peter.
Yes. And another thing that differs from book to movie, because they kind of just moved the placement of it. The next, after the whole Harry pointing out that Pettigrew is on the map, they have divination and they're messing with crystal balls, which isn't something that doesn't happen until later in the book. And it's after Harry returns a runaway crystal ball, that's when Trelawney has this sort of prophecy moment, which doesn't actually happen until it's finals week for the students. And so they just kind of smushed two different instances, because it's the crystal balls that's the final straw for Hermione in being in the class. And so
she's over it.
She is. But it also probably doesn't hurt that, as we are about to learn how Hermione has made it to her classes all semester long, it really actually doesn't. It makes a lot of sense why Hermione is so fed up with everything.
She's so tired, and it's her fault.
She is. But yeah, so in the Shrieking Shack, you have Sirius Black, you have the moment between Lupin and Black, and you have the fact that we now know that Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew.
Yes, and in the book, I believe also in the movie, Lupin also admits that he's a werewolf.
Yes.
Because he gives us the information that essentially all 4 of the Marauders learned how to be animagus. Because they wanted to help tame Lupin during his transformations. It was their way of working with him. I love in the movie when he's like, is that rat missing a finger? Because they found of Peter was a finger. He's like, is your rat missing like a toe? I don't know, what, a claw? What do rats have?
On his front paw.
Yeah. And that's when they essentially force Peter to sort of transform back into Peter.
Yeah, and like in the book, it's really established that the map never lies. Like whoever shows up on the map, that is in fact true.
Yeah, because he says that in the movie. He goes, "The map never lies."
Yes, but like the way that it's established in the book is a little different than the way it's established in the movie.
Yes, very different.
And then like in the book, they go into this whole thing of like why Peter Pettigrew can't be an animagus because he's not registered. And that's when we learn that, okay, there are actually several unregistered animaguses because that's where we have Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, which are the names that you find on the Marauders map. And that's just referring to Lupin, Pettigrew, Sirius, and James.
Can you just imagine? Listen here. Your friends are like, okay, you're going to be Moony, you're going to be Padfoot, you're going to be Prongs, you're going to be Wormtail. What? Wormtail? Just because I'm a rat? I couldn't have a better nickname?
I mean, it took me a second to like piece it all together the first time I read it. It was like, why Prongs? Like Wormtail I got, Padfoot I kind of understand, but it took me a second to figure out like why Prongs, because they never actually state that James was a stag. A stag. That was his animagus.
Yeah. And of course Snape, who just can't let it go.
No.
And holds such a grudge, arrives to apprehend Black because he's like, I knew you were here. I'm not an idiot.
And he swore that it was Lupin's fault as to how Black was able to get into the castle this entire time, where Lupin has actually been wrestling with the whole fact that like his dearest friend has been doing all of this.
Yeah, he's been having a hard time. He's like, because he genuinely thought that Sirius had killed Peter. And now knowing that Peter is on the map never lies. The map never lies.
Well, it was also not only just like the possibility of Black killing Pettigrew, it was the idea of Black giving the Potters to Voldemort. That I think that was really one of the things that was really hard for him to accept and believe, because that didn't line up with the person that he knew.
Yeah. But Harry, Ron, and Hermione knock Snape unconscious because, why not? And that's when Remus and Sirius force Peter to transform into human, and they're going to kill him, and Harry stops them, which, like, Harry, listen, people gotta die. It's a war.
Well,
no, I know why
with this whole, like, oh, well, James would have let him live. It's like, would he, though?
No. Like, that's, like, James would have been over it. James would, like, especially if James was still alive, if, like, he and Lily had made it through all of that, he'd been like, you gave us up to literally the Dark Lord. What? No. You ain't going to Azkaban. He's going to die right here.
Yeah.
Which, of course, gives Pettigrew the opportunity to escape.
Yes.
And we also get to see Lupin transforming into a werewolf because he has forgotten that it is the full moon.
Yep. And then you have Sirius Black transform into his animagus form to help combat with Lupin turning and trying to protect Ron, Harry, and Hermione. And then you have the Dementors showing up, and Harry does all that he can, but he struggles with getting his Patronus to work.
Yeah.
And then randomly there's a Patronus. It's a stag Patronus.
It's a mysterious Patronus
that shows up. And then that's where we go to the hospital wing.
Yes.
We learn a few things.
Just a few.
And in the book, it's Snape pretty much being a tattletale to Fudge about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And painting it to where Sirius Black is going to be given the Dementor's kiss.
Yeah, he's gonna have his soul sucked out.
Yes.
Which is just 100% terrifying.
Yes. And then, but like in the movie, you don't see Fudge at all.
No, he doesn't come back.
And right, but you do get to see Dumbledore, and Dumbledore tells Hermione, "Oh, 3 turns should do it."
Yes.
And that's when we get introduced to the Time Turner.
The very cool device.
Yes. And so we learn how Hermione's been able to get to her lessons the entire year and watch Harry and Hermione relive everything from before Buckbeak is executed to Black almost having his soul sucked out on the side of a little like pond.
Yes, which is it's just fun to sort of watch it. I remember watching like the behind the scenes feature of how they filmed all of that, because obviously you can't have Emma Watson and Daniel Radcliffe here and also over there. So it's very cool. And I'll never get over Emma Watson getting to punch Tom Felton in the face over and over again. So such a good moment. But yes, they use the Time Turner. Their whole goal is to just essentially stop what is happening from happening, which is how we learn that
their understanding is that they are supposed to be going to save Sirius, and then they start putting it together that they can also save Buckbeak as well. And so
because he wouldn't have told you 3 turns if you were just trying to save Sirius.
Right.
There is obviously a method to Dumbledore's madness.
Yes, but they get to save both Buckbeak and Sirius, and they give Sirius Buckbeak to escape. Yeah.
And we also learned that the mysterious Patronus that was cast earlier was cast by Harry, which in the movie, of course, Harry's like, where's it going to come from? Where is the Patronus?
Yeah.
And then Hermione's like, dude. And then he finds out that it's him, which that moment will always be one of my probably favorite, like most made fun of moments in Harry Potter. Expecto Patronum! It's just the way Daniel delivers that.
It's been memed so many times. And it's like in the movie, after all that happens, we have Lupin leaving and
being outed as a werewolf.
Right, and him giving the map back to Harry, and then the next thing we see is Harry getting the firebolt and it was delivered with a feather from Buckbeak. So that's the only reason why we know it's from Sirius, where in the book we have Snape. Essentially, the way that I imagine every time like I read this part of the book, it's like, and I would have gotten away with it too, for those meddling kids, like because it's described as a roar of aggravation, and that's just literally what I think of.
Very that.
And Snape like instantly blames Potter, like, it's all that. But, the Dementors leave Hogwarts. Ron is unconscious for this entire thing, which is not how it is in the movie. He's very much awake and is very confused by how they could be in one spot and then in another. Like,
you were there and then you were there.
Yeah. And then in the book, Lupin gives Harry the cloak and the map back, and then Dumbledore makes a statement of Prongs Road again to Harry as they discuss how things actually went down. We get to see Ron inviting Harry to stay with the Weasleys for the summer because it's supposed to be the Quidditch World Cup. So, it'd be very exciting if they could do that instead of him being stuck with the Dursleys the whole time. Harry receives a letter from Sirius, and with that letter that Harry receives, Ron gets an owl because Sirius feels bad that because of him, Ron lost his rat. So he provides him an owl, which is like...
Oh, good Lord. Sorry, I just had a remembrance of the owl. My brain went, oh no. I forget everything this owl does. Poor Ron. It's just one thing after another.
Yeah.
And he also gets permission from Sirius to go to Hogsmeade next year, to start visiting Hogsmeade.
Yes.
Which is...
And, and it happens, in the book as well as in the movie, where Sirius offers Harry to come and live with him, but obviously that can't happen until things kind of calm down around
Sirius has to be cleared.
It's like he can't be on the run and have...
a child in his house.
Nope. That's just not safe.
In
it's
his
not
weird
smart.
house that exists between other houses.
Yes.
And
then I think it's really cool with the end credits for this movie where they make it the Marauders map. I think it's one of the most creative set of credits.
Very impressive. That they thought to do that.
No, I think that was very smart on the director's choice, because I think that's what I read is whose choice it was.
Alfonso's choice?
Yes. And then one more fun fact about this movie. This was the only of the franchise to not gross over 800 million worldwide.
That's so sad.
And I think it's interesting because a lot of people claim that this is their favorite book. And overall, it's a very decent adaptation. There are a number of things that are, quote, missing from the adaptation that we didn't talk about. But the reason why we didn't talk about it is because it's not all that important. It doesn't set anything up for what's to come. It doesn't,
they're little details.
It doesn't, it doesn't impact anything that's, going on that's, major plot points. So it's interesting that it didn't do as well as the others.
I don't know why either, because this is probably one of my favorite movies. It's not my favorite book. My favorite book is Goblet, which obviously we'll do next.
Mm-hmm.
But this, only because the Goblet of Fire movie is trash.
We'll get there when we get there. It'll be season 2 before we get there.
This is probably one of my favorite movies. I love the way that it's filmed. I think Alfonso did such a good job of bringing out and introducing the darkness, because the first 2 movies, I feel like, were always a lot brighter.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're supposed to be children's stories. There are scary things. There's a big snake in that one.
The basilisk.
But this is the movie where you really start to become aware of the evil in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So this is definitely one of my favorite movies.
No, it's definitely a well shot, well written, and adapted piece. Mm-hmm. So that is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Look at that! Look at us go.
So, thank you, J.K. Rowling, for writing the book. We'll probably thank her every single time because she wrote the book. Thank you, Alfonso.
You did a lovely job of adapting this.
Yeah, for being able to bring this off the paper to life in such a colorful yet dark way.
It's very Guillermo del Toro, the way that he does it. It's very reminiscent of his style, I think. Big thanks to Zakaka for our wonderful artwork. All the work you did on our artwork. How many times can I say work in one sentence? And thanks to you guys for tuning in to League of Lit. If you have any suggestions for an episode, feel free to leave a comment on leagueoflit.tumblr.com.